Hello, everyone. We're going to be taking it a step further and learning about for-in range loops. Last week, we learned about for loops, which let us directly work with items in the list. But for-in range loops, these are all about precision. They let you count through numbers in specific patterns. So let's say you want to look at only every third item, or maybe you want to count backwards, or you want to track positions while you're looping. That's where the for-in range loop comes in. While regular for loops, those are great for going through entire collections. And for-in range loops, they give you that extra control over exactly how many times and in what pattern you want to repeat something. So let's dive in and see how they work. So what exactly is a for-in range loop? It's basically a way to tell Python, hey, I need you to repeat this task a specific number of times. And the range function is what makes this happen. It creates a sequence of numbers for your loop to work through one by one. So here's what a basic structure looks like. So let's break this down. We have our for loop, of course, and then we have number, which is our variable that is automatically going to take the value from the range one at a time. We have this n that is saying, hey, go inside of this range function and iterate through these values. Start is where the range begins. So if you don't include it, Python is going to start at 0. And end is where your range stops. But this number itself isn't included. Now there's one more thing that you can add to a range, a step. Let me give you an example. And so the step decides how much you move forward after each loop. If you don't specify it, Python's going to assume that you are stepping forward by 1, meaning it will go through every number in the range. But if you set the step to 3, like in this example, Python will jump ahead by 3 each time. So let me run this code for you so you can see exactly what this is going to print. All right, so we see that it prints 0369. So this range function is returning numbers between 0 and 10, and it's skipping everything by 3. So between the start, the end, and skipping everything by 3. So let me give you some more examples and how they play out in the real world. Okay, I'm going to comment this out. Let me also just put step. Range step. So I'm going to be pasting code in because you really don't want to see me struggle typing. So make sure to pause this to type down the code. All right, so here's an example. We're going to create an example that is budgeting for community event supplies. And here's what we need to do. We're going to be buying supplies for a community event, and we need to figure out the total cost. All right, so here are the prices. This is a list that holds the prices for each item. And then we have the total cost, which is starting at 0. And we're going to add each price to this. And so now we have our for-in range loop here. And I is the index of the variable. And then the range, it's taking this length of supply prices. And this part right here is going to generate a sequence of numbers starting from 0 up to, but not including, the length of supply prices. Because Python uses zero-based indexing, which we learned when we spoke about lists and strings, the first item in any list is at index 0. So if this list has 5 items, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, range 5, this is going to equal 5, will produce the sequence 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And the variable I will take on each of these values, allowing the loop to access each item in the list by its position. So using an index is helpful when you need to track the position of items or modify them during the loop. And now let's go inside of our for-in range loop, and then we have total cost. And we're going to be adding the price of the current item to the total cost. And then, of course, outside of the for-in range loop, we have our print statement. So let me just go ahead and run this code. And we can see that the total cost for the supplies is $105.99. And so in this example, This loop allowed us to calculate the total cost of supplies by iterating through each item price and adding it to the total cost. We use this I to look up the element in the supply prices index and add it to the total cost. So I'm going to comment this out. Oh, I totally forgot about this function now. I'm going to collapse the code from beforehand. What we're going to do in this example, we are going to automate TikTok post scheduling. So let's use this step argument in a real world scenario. Let's say you're planning to post on TikTok every 3 days for the next 12 days. Instead of checking every single day, you just want to focus on every third day. And that's when the step actually comes in handy in these for in range loops. I'm going to go ahead and paste this code for us. All right, so let's break down this code. So we're going to have days between posts, and we're going to set that as 3. And so this is going to set how often that will post. And then we have this empty list, scheduled days. And this empty list is going to be used to store the days when posts will go out. All right, so for our for loop, what we're going to have is this variable day. We're going to use this to represent the number that the range sequence creates for us. And let's look what's happening inside of the range function. We're going to have the start. It's going to start at 3. It's going to end before 13. So remember, the end is exclusive, and meaning that it does not include the end number. And then we have our step, and this step is going to be 3. And so what this means is that we're going to be adding each scheduled day to the list. So this should print out 3, 6, 9, 12. And then once this loop is done, we're going to have a print statement that is going to print our scheduled days list for us. So let me go ahead and run this code. And we can see scheduled posting days, 3, 6, 9, 12. All right, so this example demonstrated how we could use the step value in a range loop. The step argument allowed us to automatically select every third day for posting, and this ensured that our schedule is consistent without having to check every single day manually. All right, so I'm going to close this up, and let's move on to our next example. Okay, so here's our next example, and this is going to be a little bit more complex, not too much, but a little bit more. And so this is going to be a social media engagement tracker. What we're going to do is we're going to track our social media engagement by analyzing the number of likes, comments, and shares on different posts over the week. So this is going to let us practice the for and range loops, as well as conditional logic and function calls to keep the code modular. All right, so I'm going to post quite a bit of code. Make sure to pause this to see everything. Let's make this a little bit smaller so we can see all the code. Make this smaller. All right, so we've defined a function analyze engagement, and it's taking 3 parameters, likes, comments, and shares, and this represents engagement metrics for a post. Now inside the function body, we have total engagement, and this is going to add up to the 3 engagement metrics to calculate the total engagement for the post. And then we have some conditional statements. If the total engagement is over 100, we're going to return high engagement. Else if 50, return moderate. Else low engagement. All right, and so we have this weekly post list. This is a list containing engagement data for our 4 posts, and each post is represented by a sublist of likes, comments, and shares. This is our for in range loop, and week is going to be the index. And this loop is going to iterate over all the indexes of the weekly posts, starting from 0 up to the length of the list. Now, in this example, we did not specify a start, end, and step. Instead, start is going to default to 0. And now we have our end, which is the length of the weekly post, but not including the last item. This is the length of the weekly post. And then we have our step, which is inferred, and it defaults to 1. So all we passed in was just one argument, and that essentially is the end. Okay, so right here we have this line, and this line gets the post at the index week. And it's going to unpack the engagement data into these variables: likes, comments, shares. And this is a technique known as unpacking. Each element in the weekly post list itself is a list. Remember, so this is the weekly post list, but this element is also a list. And it contains those 3 numbers: likes, comments, and shares. And so by writing this line like this, we're telling Python, look, on this left side of the assignment, assign the first value to likes, assign the second value to comments, and assign the third value to shares. Okay, and so our next line, status, this is going to call the analyze engagement function, and it's going to pass in as arguments likes, comments, and shares. We'll be assigning the return value to the status, and this is going to print the engagement status for each week. Since Python's lists start counting at 0, adding 1 to week makes the output more intuitive by starting the week count at 1. Okay, so I'm going to run the code. And so we can see that when we iterate it through each element in the list, the first element, week 1, has moderate engagement. And let's just verify that. So right here, length equals weekly posts. It's going to say 1, 2, 3, 4. So this length is going to be 4. And we'll start the range function from 0 up to 4, not including 4. So right here, week is 0. And so we go inside of here, weekly post equals 0. We do a lookup here. It's going to grab 30, 15, 10. It's going to assign likes to 30, 15, and 10. And then we're going to get the status. So we're going to go to this analyze engagement function, and we're going to pass in likes, comments, and shares. Up here, we go to the function definition. We analyze this engagement, and we see that likes is 30 plus comments, what was that, 40, I think I said, plus 15 in shares. And so that is going to equal, what is that, 30 plus, what was it? Oh, sorry, 30 plus 15 plus 10. So 45 plus 10 is 55. So total engagement is 55. And then we're going to go through these conditionals, this if-else statement, and we see that the total engagement is greater than or equal to 50, but it's also less than this number. So that's going to return moderate engagement, and that's what we have here. So when we go back to this, it's going to print week 1 because week was 0. We added 1. And then the status, which is moderate engagement. And then that's going to do that for all the different elements in this weekly post. So this example just demonstrated how to combine for and range loops, conditional logic, and functions to analyze social media engagement data in a structured and modular way. All right, so I want to make sure that we're clear how for and range loops compare to regular for loops. Now, last week we learned about regular for loops, and the regular for loops, they go directly through items in the list. The main difference with for and range loops is that they work with a sequence of numbers rather than directly with list item. So let me give you an example. All right, so we see that we have a list of names and we have this for loop. Let me go ahead and print this. And we could see that it printed Sam, Amino, and Leo. Like literally this name variable was a placeholder for Sam. And so now let me give an example of a for in range loop. In this for in range loop, in this case, what makes this different is I represents one of these sequence of numbers that is calculated when we use this range function. So the range is going to create a sequence of numbers from 0 up to this length of the names list, which is 3, 0 up to 2, because it doesn't include 3. And then we're going to go inside of here, and for each number in that list, each index, we're going to loop that many times. And then we'll print person 0 plus 1 on the first loop. And that's going to say person 1, we're going to access the actual element in the list by indexing using that value 0. So we get Sam. And then this is going to do it for each number up to the length of the names, not including up to 3. And so that's why we have 1, 2, 3. We added I plus 1. So then the question becomes, when should you use each one? Well, use regular for loops when you just need each item directly. Like in this case, we just need it directly. Boom, Sam, Amino, Leo. But use the for in range loops when you need to know the position or index of items. And so in this case, we did need to know the position because we wanted to print person 1, person 2, person 3. And so that's the reason why we used this for in range loop. Final thoughts. So today you learned about for in range loops and how they can automate tasks like tracking scheduled social media posts and calculating costs. Now these examples show how Python can be used to solve problems in real life. So be sure to check the Course Hub for extra exercises and resources. One of the exercises that we have, this assignment, it's there to deepen your understanding and it's going to stretch your skills because you'll be practicing common Python methods from scratch, implementing them from scratch. So you're going to have a chance to test your own solution, focus on the core concepts that you've learned so far, like strings, lists, functions, and loops, and make sure to just experiment, make mistakes. Use this as an opportunity to refine your skills. You will sweat, and go ahead, be happy that you're sweating a little bit with it. Make sure to use Google to help you solve it. Be very careful if you use AI because AI is just going to tell you the answer unless you prompt it not. All right. So if you found this helpful, share it, leave a comment, share your progress. And if you have any questions, make sure to post in the We Are the Blueprints Discord community help channel. Alrighty. See you next time.